everybody loves strawberry jam, and it's surprisingly easy to make your own, and it'll just taste so fantastic. You only need 4 ingredients: strawberries, an equal weight of caster sugar or granulated sugar, the juice of a lemon, and a little knob of butter. In fact, actually, you don't need the lemon and the butter straight away because this is a 2-day process. So, day 1, you start with your strawberries, and you just need to hold them and check them. So let's remove that green leaf there, and if they're quite big, cut them in half, or if they're really massive ones, even into quarters. And as you're doing them, just check them. Now, I don't know whether you can see there, we've just got a little soft patch on that strawberry, and that means that's not a good one to use. I'm going to put that one aside. It's good enough for eating, but not for jam making. When you're making jam, you must be careful to choose fruits that are not overripe, because if they're beginning to soften, then the jam is likely not to keep as well. It'll probably go off quicker. In fact, in an ideal world, you want to use some just ripe fruit, and maybe even 1 or 2 that are slightly underripe, because one of the most important ingredients in jam, and it's one that is actually there in the fruit you use, is something called pectin. And underripe fruit tend to have a little bit more pectin than fully ripened ones. And last but not least, this rather sweet little one that I'll leave whole. So I've got the strawberries all ready, and now I'm going to tip in half the sugar, more or less. It doesn't need to be exact. I'm using granulated sugar, but you can use caster sugar if you like, that's absolutely fine. There is also something called jam sugar, which has added pectin in it, and you can use that, but personally I've found that my jam tends to go off more quickly if I do use it. But the advantage of using a jam sugar is that you're guaranteed a good set, so it's kind of swings and roundabouts. Now I'm just mixing and turning my strawberries and sugar carefully. Then I'm going to cover it with cling film and leave them to marinate overnight. And during that time, the sugar will start to draw out the juices of the strawberries, and it'll dissolve into a lovely sort of gooey strawberry syrup. And that makes it much better for cooking. It makes it cook more evenly, and it should enhance the setting properties. So here are those strawberries that I marinated with half the sugar last night, and you can see that overnight the sugar has dissolved into the juice of the strawberries, and actually the strawberries have shrunk slightly, and you can see how much gorgeous strawberry syrup there is now, and it's wonderfully fragrant. Now that's going to go into my saucepan, but before I do that I just want to point out that in the oven here I've got my jam jars ready and waiting, and they have been sterilised, or they are sterilising. So what you do to sterilise them is you rinse them out in soapy water and then rinse them again in clear water, pop them on a rack in your oven, top down, and set the oven to about 140 degrees centigrade so that they dry out and the heat kills off any moulds and bacteria that might be lingering in the jars. I'll leave those there till I actually need to use them so that they stay hot. So first thing to do is to get these strawberries and all that juice into the pan. Scrape out the last bits of sugar that haven't quite dissolved at the bottom there. Now, in goes the remaining sugar. In that goes. And to that, we need to add the lemon juice. I'm using quite a nice large lemon. And the acidity of the lemon juice helps to improve the set of the jam. Now I can turn the heat on. I'm going to put the jam on at a fairly low heat at first and stir it around until the sugar has completely dissolved. And it's very important to get your sugar totally dissolved before you allow the jam to boil up. So my sugar has completely dissolved into the strawberry juice, and now it's coming up to the boil, and you can see it's just rising up there, a great big boil, and it is really literally rising in the pan. So it is essential that you use a very roomy pan whenever you make jam. I'm going to leave that to boil away. It'll probably take around 30 minutes to reach setting point, but it's worth checking every 10 minutes or so until you're getting close. My jam has been boiling for about 10 minutes now, so I think it's time to test. And here I've got a plate that I've had in my freezer. It's very cold, and I'm going to drip just a few drops of the juice onto the plate, and it's really gone quite sticky. In fact, it's just like real jam. Perfect. So, what next? Well, I'm going to add my knob of butter now. Now, it may seem rather an odd thing to do. It's not essential, but that little bit of butter will just give the jam a lovely sparkling clarity. Stir it in, and before I pot the jam up, I need to remove the scum that's risen to the top. There's not actually that much scum on the surface of this jam, but I'm just going to take off what I can see. And this is really just a way of making your jam clearer. And do you know, the other thing that I really used to like when I was a child is we used to get the scum to have straight away with bread and butter, and it's delicious because it has a slightly foamy taste. I think that's more or less it. So I'm almost ready to pot the jam, but not quite. I'm going to leave it to stand for 5 to 10 minutes and just thicken up slightly. It'll still be very, very hot, but the reason I do that is so that the strawberries don't all sink to the bottom of each jam jar. So my jam jars are extremely hot, and the jam, although it's cooled down a bit and thickened a bit, it is still very, very hot and ready to pot. This is a jam funnel, and although it's not absolutely essential, it does make filling jam jars much easier and much less sticky. In goes the jam. And the advantage of having hot jam and hot pots is that you kill off as much of the bacteria and moulds as you can, so that the jam doesn't deteriorate. And the whole point of jam making really is to preserve a glut of fruit at the height of summer. So you do everything you can for the jam to survive through into the cold weather of winter. Before they cool down, I need to carry on and cover the surface of each one with a disc of waxed paper. Now, these discs are just slightly too big for the size of my jam jar, so I need to trim them down to the right size, and you really do have to make the effort to do this, because again, it's about protecting the surface of the jam from any stray moulds that are just wafting around in the air, and believe me, they are there even if you can't see them. So I've just folded my circle into eighths, and then I'm going to trim off just a tiny bit of the edge, which I think will be enough for this to fit inside the jam jar. Let's see. That is perfect. You don't always get it right first time. Now, once you get it in, you have to just press the wax paper down onto the surface of the jam, just gently pushing out any air bubbles and making a complete seal. And then while the jam is still hot, quickly pop a lid on, like that. Now, if you don't have the lid to the jam jar, there's no need to despair, and lids do disappear somehow. So let's just cover another one and I'll show you what to do. Onto the surface of the jam, then I'm going to use one of these, and when you buy the discs of wax paper, they come with cellophane circles as well and elastic bands. And to get a really tight fitting seal, you get your cellophane and you just dampen it like that. Dry it off, more or less. It goes very floppy and sticky, but don't worry, that's fine. Dry it off on a tea towel, and then you can stretch it gently over. I'll take this out here. You stretch it gently over the top of the jam jar and pop an elastic band over it. And as that circle of cellophane dries out, it'll become very, very taut. It'll shrink slightly and give you a really good close seal. And that's it, the best strawberry jam you're ever going to taste.